OBS running. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we're all having a good weekend, and I hope our weeks have been good so far. Well, I say so far as if it isn't the last day of the week. This is our last Dino class before Christmas. And I do believe everyone is out on holiday now. I am going to be, just because I want to be a little festive, I am going to, there we go, throw up my jolly Tyrannosaur. There is our jolly Tyrannosaur for class. Hello, hello. Welcome in. Love you, dinosaur teacher. Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope we're all going to have a good Christmas this year. There's some really cool stuff that is coming out during the winter. And it's my favorite time of year because here's the thing about fossil discoveries is that field season is during the summer, and then you start getting all of these really cool papers at the end of the year. So we've got a lot of really cool stuff that has happened since you last saw me. There has been evidence of a freshwater mosasaur in the Hell Creek Formation, possibly related to Prognathodon. There is a new dinosaur egg. I want to talk about that a little bit because I saw yesterday a video where someone was like, they found a perfectly preserved dinosaur egg, and like they're gonna like replicate or like recreate dinosaurs with it, and that's just not true. They said that there is an embryo found in the egg, and yes, there is like the fossilized remains of an embryo inside the egg, but to be completely honest with you, that thing's probably been it's been gone for like 80 million years. So like you're not getting any like genetic information out of that. So it's just kind of ridiculous when I hear people say that. It's like, oh, they're gonna take the DNA from it and they're gonna make a T-Rex. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. That's not how that works at all, actually. But yeah. Talk about Allosaurus anax or Saurophaganax. Allosaurus anax is really cool. Of course, Saurophaganax, the name now currently describes a sauropod. Of course, it was either the beginning of this year or the end of last year. We had the paper come out that suggested that Saurophaganax was a chimeric specimen of a long-necked dinosaur and an allosaur. The main name-bearing specimen of it were the vertebrae, which turned out to belong to a sauropod. So the name stuck with those bones and likely is going to a sauropod, if it is a new sauropod at least, which it might be. Allosaurus anax is what they named the material that was allosaurid. So there is still this giant allosaur in the late Jurassic. It's just not called Saurophaganax anymore. It didn't go anywhere. It's still here. Like, we just have a different name for it now, right? But otherwise, it's possibly the largest species of Allosaurus we know. It is just absolutely ridiculous because it's like nearly T-Rex sized. For a Jurassic animal, which is kind of absurd because you don't really get giant carnivores that big in the Jurassic. You mostly get stuff that's around the size of like Fragilis and stuff like that. I want to say, God, how long was it? I know it was like well over like 30 feet long, but it was just a huge animal. Crazy stuff. But yeah. Talk about Temeriraptor. Temeriraptor is actually a dinosaur that was named this year and is quite controversial, at least in a little bit. So if you know the story of Spinosaurus, then you probably already know the story of Temeriraptor. You just don't know it yet. So the bones that were found in Egypt were found by a guy named Stromer. And at the time of like the 30s and the 40s, the material of like all of like the Egyptian fossils was in Munich, I want to say, and they were destroyed during World War II. Now, the unfortunate thing is that we lost a lot of specimens that day. When those specimens were gone, there was no replacing them. However, Stromer did have a lot of illustrations of them, and that's what we've been using since then. It's not until like the 90s that we start getting more Spinosaurus material. And we do have a neotype specimen for Carcharodontosaurus now. However, a lot of people believe that the supposed Carcharodontosaurus material that Stromer had wasn't actually Carcharodontosaurus, and thus, this year, it was described as a new Carcharodontosaurid called Temeriraptor. Now, Temeriraptor is very unique because it seems to have a little horn on its nose, which is kind of odd because no other large Carcharodontosaurid has a structure like that, let alone a Carcharodontosaurid in general. You don't really see nasal horns on these kinds of animals. So it's very, very strange and fascinating. There's some people who still think the material should be or should belong to Carcharodontosaurus. Some people think that it is like its own thing. But unfortunately, the material was completely destroyed, so it's going to be really hard to prove it one way or the other. So yeah. Look, I just want to ask why T-Rex has such small hands. It's because it doesn't need them, right? And I'll show you. So the thing about T-Rex, as well as like a lot of other large apex predators of like the Mesozoic, is that you'll notice that a large amount of them have really small arms. And that comes down to one big reason, and it's that they don't need them. When you have a head that is this big, right? Your head is gigantic, right? We're just so used to seeing stuff like T-Rex that you don't fully like realize how big proportionally their heads are compared to the rest of their body. Now, T-Rex is an anomaly, kind of, in a sense, right? Because if you look at the skulls of things like Carcharodontosaurus or Giganotosaurus or stuff like that, you notice that they're actually a lot more lightly built, right? There's a lot more openings in their skulls. There's a lot less bone. There's a lot more open air in the skulls themselves. This is to lessen the weight of their ginormous heads. T-Rex does not work like that. T-Rex has a ton of bone in its skull. An absurd amount of bone is located in this animal's skull. Why? Well, the reason is, it's because it's crushing. All of the other large theropods, like the Carcharodontosaurids, those guys are mostly cutting into their prey, and you can tell that based off of their teeth. Go look at the teeth of the Carcharodontosaurids. There's a reason they're named that. That name means the shark-toothed reptiles, right? And it's because their teeth are flat and serrated. They're meant for cutting. And you look at the skulls of them, and you notice that as well. Their skulls are a lot more elongated and skinny. It like fits that profile. But then you look at T-Rex. Giant, blocky heads. These super long, thick, rounded, serrated teeth. These are animals that were built for crushing, right? But either way, both of those animals, the larger Carcharodontosaurids and Tyrannosaurus, both of them have reduced forelimbs because they're not using their forelimbs. So overall, it just comes down to the fact that they don't need them. They just use their heads. So yeah, do the roar. Okay, I can do the roar. Hold on, where is it? I don't know how well that picked up on the stream, but there you go. But yeah, why does Spinosaurus have such short legs and big arms? Honestly, if you wanted me to give you an honest answer, we're not exactly sure of the biomechanics of it, but I'll give you my best idea as to why. Because it probably comes down to lifestyle. Spinosaurus is, I was calling T-Rex an anomaly before, but it's like the more we learn about Spinosaurus, the less we understand about Spinosaurus, right? Okay, so check this out. I'm going to move the camera all the way back here. So check this out. What do you notice about the back legs and the arms? Well, if you said, hey, they're kind of both near the ground without having to try really hard, then you would be correct. Because here's the thing. A lot of the anatomy of Spinosaurus seems to suggest that rather than being an aquatic pursuit predator. This was an animal that was staying by the shoreline, waiting in the water, waiting for fish to come by, and just otherwise not really moving a whole lot. Now, there's a lot of bits of its anatomy that point towards this suggestion. One of the smoking guns, in my opinion, on that are the pressure sensors that are located on the end of the snout. I don't know how well you can see that on this model. Yeah, no, you can't really see it at all. But on the tip of Spinosaurus' snout, there's a lot of dots, and these dots are kind of like pressure sensors. Modern crocodiles and alligators have similar stuff. It allows them to sense where fish are before they can even see them, or without even seeing them. So if you're an animal that is likely sticking its nose into the water like this all of the time, it pays to have shorter legs so you don't have to like squat down like this, like all the time, and you can just kind of hang your head down. So more than likely, it's just because it was rather convenient, right? And it put a lot less strain on the body. And over time, you know, what Spinosaurus evolved from would eventually get shorter and shorter legs for that kind of lifestyle. But yeah. Plus Spinosaurus is semi-aquatic. Yes, it is. It is. Spinosaurus is semi-aquatic. Spinosaurus, also, I'd like to mention, there is this huge misconception with Spinosaurus' tail. All right, and I'm gonna say this now. Spinosaurus' tail is probably not made for swimming. Spinosaurus probably did not swim as well as a lot of people assume it does. Because here's the thing. You see this tail? You see this tail right here? What do you notice? If you've noticed the fact that it's mostly parallel and evened out throughout most of it, you would be correct once again. That is very strange for an animal that is supposedly using it for swimming, because you don't see that kind of anatomy with animals that have tails for swimming. That's not the structure that tails meant for swimming take. Go look at whales, crocodiles, sharks, dolphins, fish even. What do you notice? They've got these giant tail flukes at the end of their tail. These massive propulsion flukes, right? Even mosasaurs are thought to have tail flukes, right? Even if they didn't preserve, but even still, Spinosaurus' tail doesn't appear to be built for that. It appears that it's probably more for display than anything, because it shares a very interesting, like, convergent evolution type structure with things like basilisk lizards. Go look up basilisk lizards, by the way. Absolutely wild animals. They can run on water. There was also that one art piece that I saw of a Spinosaurus doing that. Crazy concept for a Spino to be able to run on water. But yeah. How interesting would it be to live in the Cambrian period? Assuming you have the right equipment, because if you went to the Cambrian without like an oxygen tank, a face mask, maybe a biohazard suit just to be safe, because like you'd also be introducing a lot of disease and bacteria into the Cambrian, and while that probably wouldn't bode well, assuming you did all of that, probably pretty boring. I'm not gonna lie to you. A lot of people, when they're talking about the Cambrian, they talk about hallucinogenia, Anomalocaris, the Tullymonstrum, stuff like that. The really weird guys, right? Here's the thing. Anomalocaris is probably the largest out of those three, if not the Tullymonstrum or the Tully Monster. That guy's like the size of your hand, at largest. You're exploring the Cambrian would kind of be like jumping into a swimming pool and there's like 7 shrimp in there. Not a whole lot going on. I mean, you got the shrimp, but otherwise, not a lot going on. But yeah. Hello, Ellie. Welcome in. There we go. Which dinosaur would be the tastiest? Well, I can tell you now that it's probably a dinosaur that's alive today. because you eat dinosaur. If you eat chicken, if you had turkey this Thanksgiving, or you're gonna have turkey this Christmas, you're eating a dinosaur all the time. So when you're at Christmas or just or Hanukkah or whatever you're doing with your family this holiday season, and they're serving turkey, um, make sure to remind them that that is a dinosaur, that you are eating a dinosaur. And let me tell you, smoked turkey done right, that's some good stuff right there. In terms of non-avian dinosaurs, I imagine ornithomimids, things like Gallimimus, Struthiomimus, they would probably taste the best, and they would probably also taste the most familiar to us because they're very similar to things like ostriches and modern ratites and stuff like that. Not that I've ever had a ratite, but I don't know, I guess it's the closest thing to a chicken. But yeah, what dinosaur has the most back problems? It would have to be a thyreophorine, right? Now, then again, I will also say that that they are built to hold these things. So if you don't know what a thyreophorine is, I guarantee you do, because it's these guys. It's the stegosaurs, and by extension, also the ankylosaurs. These guys have tons of these giant plates sitting on their backs. These are called osteoderms. Osteoderms are seen in modern archosaurs like crocodilians and stuff like that. Now, reminder that crocodilians are not dinosaurs, but birds are. But birds and crocodilians are actually their closest relatives. So like crocodiles are more related to birds than they are to like lizards and snakes, which is just absolutely wild. But crocodilians do have osteoderms. These are basically just free-floating bones outside of the skin, or outside of the skin, free-floating bones in the skin. So yeah, if there was a dinosaur with large back problems, it would have to be like the stegosaurs or the ankylosaurs. But then again, I will also say that these animals are built to hold on to these for their entire lives because they don't shed these. So if you watched like Camp Cretaceous and you listen to that one kid, I completely forget his name, and he's like, oh yeah, stegosaurids shed their plates in the winter or whatever. No, they don't. No, they don't. If a stegosaurid shedded its plate, that would be like you shedding a toe. Do you want to shed a toe? Do you shed toes? You don't shed toes. Why would a stegosaurid lose its back plates? That's absurd. But when it comes down to like other dinosaurs, like with posture, I'd say Therizinosaurus. Therizinosaurus has some whack posture. Absolutely crazy posture. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Brachiosaurus? Ooh! Okay, Brachiosaurus, for those of you that don't know, is a large titanosaur, or presumably large titanosaur, from India, I want to say. The thing is that if Brachiosaurus is real, it is among the largest animals that has ever existed on the planet. The thing is that I don't think it has any skeletal material remaining. It had like one giant bone, and unfortunately, it was eroded away. They left it out in the open, I think, or something happened to what they were using to cover it, and it got washed away during like monsoon season, I want to say. I don't know like too many of the specifics, but there's this large debate on whether or not that material was petrified tree or if it was a sauropod. And I think they've settled and said that it is a sauropod, but there is no further material of this animal that paleontologists have found so far. So as of now, there's no reliable way to say how big it was, or even to get like weight estimates. You could go with the estimates based off of the one fossil if like I think we have like the measurements of it, but like either way, it's gonna be somewhat unreliable because you can't like test that, and there's a lot of different ways to measure certain bones when it comes down to like missing chunks of the bone and all that stuff. So yeah. What dinosaur has the most bones? Oh god, that's hard for me to say confidently because I'm not entirely sure. If I had to put money on it, it would come down to probably maybe Scelidosaurus. If you don't know what Scelidosaurus is this basal thyreophoran from the UK, I want to say, and it's just covered in these tiny osteoderms. So I would say maybe that one, or potentially a type of large sauropod because they would have these like tons of bones in like their neck and stuff like that. Maybe even maybe even like Miragaia, the stegosaurid, possibly because Miragaia had like way more bones. I think what Miragaia had 14 bones in its neck, whereas most sauropods have near 11. I want you to think about that for a little bit, by the way. Think about an animal that is like maybe eye level with you. It's a type of stegosaurid, and it's got 14 bones in its neck, whilst some of the largest animals that ever lived on the planet have 11. You have 7 vertebrae in your neck, by the way, just to put that into perspective. Absolutely crazy animal. But yeah, are there any dinosaurs that just tear dinosaurs for fun and don't eat them? Behavior is not something that we have the privilege of knowing all of the time. However, there are certain... I'm not going to say that any dinosaur did or didn't do that because, like, again, they were around for like 160 million years, so there's always room for something of that. I will say, however, I highly doubt there was an entire species that would do something like that. But I will say, if a species ever did, it wasn't a carnivore. If they're not eating like the body, then it's not a carnivore. If anything ever did something like that, it would have been one of the herbivores. You would have to look at things like Stegosaurus, Triceratops, sauropods, large hadrosaurs. These are animals that for their entire lives, they are being hunted by predators that are of their size, if not larger in some cases. So, like, you spend... Just picture it, right? Picture that you're an Apatosaurus in the Morrison Formation, right? 140 million years ago, 150 million years ago, somewhere around there. And for the first, like, 15 years of your life, you spend that entire time being hunted by animals that, depending on what age you are, range from 3 times to possibly 7 times your size. You're being hunted down by these animals, right? You've lost dozens of your friends and family to these animals, but you make it. You make it to adulthood, and now you are the largest animal for the next couple 100 miles. And suddenly, you see one of these large theropods that has been preying upon you for the last, I don't know, majority of your life. You're not going to be friendly with it, because suddenly, it's like 3 times smaller than you. Not a fun time for the Allosaurus. So yeah. Yeah. What's the difference between Spinosaurus and Ocellalia? They're not anything as of now. The main difference between Ocellalia and Spinosaurus is phosphaterial. That's it. Because Ocellalia is known from 2 singular bones that are possibly fragmentary pieces of the skull. There is literally nothing else we can tell about Ocellalia based off of its fossils. It's even, like, paleontologists have a hard time trying to figure out if it's a Spinosaurian or a Baryonychian, and the worst part of it, I'm lagging a little bit there, the worst part of it is that I'm pretty sure the phosphaterial was destroyed in a museum fire. So we know that Ocellalia was a large Spinosaurid that lived in South America, and that's about it. Is it its own thing? Maybe. Could it be synonymous with Spinosaurus? Probably. Is it its own unique species within the genera of Spinosaurus? Could be. Until we find more material, it's really hard to say. And it's really unfortunate too. But yeah. What is the biggest prey item a Carnotaurus could take down in your opinion? There were a handful of sauropods in Carnotaurus's formation. one of those prey items was a smaller titanosaur called Titanomachia. And there was also another abelisaur called Colican. I would say that something around the size of Titanomachia, which would probably be comparable to like an Asian elephant, would probably be the biggest. If it's like multiple Carnotauruses, I could definitely see potentially larger prey. If it's just one, I think Titanomachia is probably going to be, like, an adult Titanomachia would probably be your biggest bet. Again, Asian elephant sized roughly. It's probably a bit taller because it's a sauropod and it's got that long neck, but somewhere around there, I would say. But yeah, Stegosaurus versus an elephant. I think they just leave each other alone. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, and also, to be fair, I think the type species for Stegosaurus stenops, it's probably a lot smaller than you think it is. Like, they're still huge animals, don't get me wrong, but Stenops is a lot smaller than a lot of the interpretations of Stegosaurus you've probably seen. If you think Stegosaurus is anywhere near the size that it was in Jurassic Park, The Lost World, you're out of your mind. You are completely out of your mind, because no, that is not how big Stegosaurus. Even the largest species of Stegosaurus ungulatus isn't even that large. Those animals were huge. Yeah. Is my birthday today? Well, happy birthday to you, Paleo Titan. Who do you think was the biggest prehistoric croc and snake? There's supposedly a snake from India that is larger than Titanoboa. I am having a hard time remembering its name because, I'll be honest, the name Titanoboa was just such a cool and catchy name, and it's really, really hard to beat that. The biggest croc, however, if we're talking true crocodilians, is Purosaurus. Purosaurus is this absolutely gigantic caiman from the Cenozoic, which is wild because when you think about giant crocs, you think about the Mesozoic, Sarcosuchus, Deinosuchus, all of these giant crocodile forms from the Mesozoic and like the Cretaceous and stuff like that. But the largest one is probably Purosaurus, and it lived in the Cenozoic. That's wild, right? Also, by the way, I just like to mention that we as a species were really lucky to have shown up later than we did, because here's the thing, had we shown up a few million years before we did, we would have had to have dealt with land crocs. Like, actual, like, terrestrial adapted crocodilians. No, I'm good. Crocodiles and stuff like that are already scary enough. I'm good. But yeah. How big are stegos in terms of like cars or something? Stenops you could probably look in the eyes. Ungulatus, you'd probably have to crane your head up a little bit. I reset the whole avatar. So this would probably be, I want to say, if I scale it, this is probably about as big as Ungulatus got, which is still huge. Don't get me wrong. It's still a giant animal. But then Stenops, the type species, was probably somewhere around here, which is like dramatically smaller than you would expect it to be. Because, like, I mean, again, still a huge animal, but still smaller than you would expect. Is the ancient bison the closest relative to the American bison? I'm not super well versed in mammals, but I think so. Maybe, probably. I think the American and European bison might be more closely related to each other, but in terms of like prehistoric relatives, probably, yeah. Also, by the way, we're gonna do a little a quiz real quick. Okay. So, here's what I'm going to ask you guys. When the first remains of Triceratops were discovered, what did paleontologists originally think they were? Here's your quiz. When the first remains of Triceratops were discovered, what did paleontologists think they were? We got a few people who got it right. They thought they were bison. In fact, they thought they were bison for a long enough period of time that they actually gave it a taxonomic designation. They gave it the name Bison alticornis, which means bison with the high horns. Very fitting, in my opinion. So yeah, it's wild. And then here's an even better one. Here's a better question for you. Therizinosaurus, right? If you don't know Therizinosaurus, if you watch Jurassic World Dominion, yes, you do. It's the thing with the really long claws that's a herbivore and like smack the deer. Therizinosaurus. When paleontologists first found Therizinosaurus, what did they think that was? What did they think? There we go. We got a few people who got it right. Yes, it is. They thought it was a turtle. They thought it was a turtle. In fact, if you look up Therizinosaurus's full binomial name, its binomial name is Therizinosaurus chelonformis, which means scythe lizard form of turtle. That will forever haunt that animal because they can't change it. Once you give something a name, it doesn't change because taxonomy is a headache because we don't like adjusting. If the name's there, it's not changing unless you've got a reason for it. So yeah. Is it true that T-Rex saw flowers and Allosaurus didn't? That's a great question because here's the thing, right? Flowering plants, as we understand them, do not really show up until about the Mesozoic. Wow, no kidding. Until the Cretaceous is what I meant. But the thing is that we have recent evidence that would suggest that potentially relatives of flowering plants were showing up in the Jurassic, but they probably wouldn't have been flowering yet. So in a way, yeah, Allosaurus and like Stegosaurus, Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Camarasaurus, all of the Stegosaurids, none of them saw flowers. More than likely, none of them saw flowers. But later dinosaurs like T-Rex, Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, Alamosaurus, larger Titanosaurs, things like Spinosaurus and the Carcharodontosaurs, they would have gotten to see flowers because you would have had the much later flowering plants now fully developing into these flowering, into the more traditional what you would expect from flowers. Not only that, you eventually see the rise of things like fruits as well, because like, you know, that's where they come from. So yeah, it's really interesting. Tell me a fact about Carno that no one knows. Carnotaurus is only known from one singular specimen. However, that is not the fact that I am going to tell you. I will say that that specimen itself is actually remarkably well preserved. It is missing the end of its tail and everything below the knees. Here's the really sad fact about Carno. The original specimen probably had skin impressions on it. But the unfortunate fact of the matter is that at that time in paleontology, we were not looking for skin impressions. So the skin impressions that were on the fossil were likely completely destroyed as they were excavating it out of the rock. So, yeah, that's a really tragic fact about Carnotaurus. Was the Columbian mammoth one of the largest mammoth species that ever lived? I do believe so, yes. Yeah, it was just this absolutely gigantic mammoth. Lived in North America, parts of Central America, stuff like that. I do believe, I want to say, I live in the southeast of the United States. I do believe they found a Columbian mammoth tusk somewhere near me, like a good I want to say 3 years ago now. Yeah, it was a good bit ago. Excuse me. But yeah. Why/how are theropods and ornithischians part of the same branch? They're not. Ornithischians. Okay, so when it comes to dinosaurs, you've got two groups. You've got saurischians and ornithischians, right? Saurischians translates to the lizard hips. Ornithischians translates to the bird hips, right? Saurischians, good examples of those guys are things like theropods and sauropods, right? These are like your T-Rexes and your Brachiosauruses, right? Those guys are more closely related to each other than they are to anything else, right? So those are your important ones. Theropods and sauropods are saurischians. Ornithischians, I'm not even kidding with you right now, is everyone else. Your stegosaurs, your ankylosaurs, your hadrosaurs, your triceratopses, your pachycephalosaurids, everybody else that is not a sauropod or a theropod is a ornithischian, right? Now, there's a few fossils that are like really strange and fragmentary, and we're not sure which branch they fall on, but by and large, if it's not a saurischian or an ornithischian, that is probably not a dinosaur. Now, as for like why we would count all of these as dinosaurs, it comes down to posture and hip structure, right? Here's the burning question that I always get asked. It is, what makes a dinosaur a dinosaur? Because whenever I say, hey, the flying reptiles, the large pterosaurs, they're not dinosaurs, but they're closely related to them. Or I talk about marine reptiles like the mosasaurs, the plesiosaurs, and the pliosaurs, and like the ichthyosaurs and all them, and I say, those guys aren't dinosaurs, they're marine reptiles. Everyone always asks, okay, well, what makes a dinosaur a dinosaur? It's posture and hip structure, right? And they work in tandem with each other. What you'll notice about all living dinosaurs, as well as extinct dinosaurs, is that they hold their legs under their body. Look at Stegosaurus here. The legs are directly under the body. Go look at crocodilians. Some species of crocodilians have their arms or their limbs slightly splayed out to the sides. Others have them completely splayed out to their sides. I think the only one that comes close to having their limbs underneath their bodies is the Cuban crocodile. So dinosaurs hold their legs underneath their bodies, and then it comes down to hip structure. The hip structure is what is like the real smoking gun here. And you have the ornithischian and the saurischian hip structures, and now there's also like a diversity of saurischian hip structures as well. But the main universal constant between those two hip structures, or those two kinds of shapes of hip structures, comes down to a hole. I'm not kidding. There is a hole in their hips. That hole you can look through. If you're looking at the animal from the side, if you look straight at the side of their hip, you can see directly through the entire hip and out the other side. If it does not have its legs underneath its body, if it does not have that hip structure, it is probably not a dinosaur. I say probably because, like, well, there's not a lot of universal constants, but there's you are 99.99999% of the time, if it has those things, it is likely a dinosaur. But yeah. Do you think Ichthyovenator had a complete sail instead of the weird sail it has? Maybe. It just kind of comes down to the fact that, to those of you that don't know what they're talking about, I'll very quickly show you. Doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. Give it a second. There we go. This is Ichthyovenator. It's got a really strange notch sail. Unfortunately, like most Spinosaurids, it is not very well complete. So it is fragmentary, and we don't have a lot of answers for the questions. It really is the tragedy of it. Definitely tried Ecos Libera on Roblox. I will give that a shot. I don't know if I have Roblox installed, so I'll have to give that a shot. I do know that I'll have to pay for that, right? I think I gotta spend, like, Robux to get in to play that, so yeah. What was the most social dinosaurs? Well, okay, so again, it's really hard to tell behavior from fossils. You're really only going to get evidence of behavior through something called trace fossils. And trace fossils are one of two types of fossils that you will find when it comes to dinosaurs. There is biological fossils, which are things like bones, skin impressions, and stuff like that. And then there's trace fossils, which are things like footprints, for example. Now, the really cool thing is that you sometimes like luck out and you find trace fossils on like actual like biological fossils on bones. And the cool thing about that is that that shows a lot of really interesting behavior. For example, there are a few T-Rex skulls that have bite marks on their skulls. Their snouts are covered in bite marks. So let me ask you this. This is another question for you guys in the class. Here's a question. If you have a T-Rex skull that has bite marks on it, what does that tell us? What does that tell you? Like, what kind of behavior do you get from looking at that evidence? They kissed a lot. That's a good way of saying it. They were a bad day. They were territorial. It was a fight. There you go. See? There you go. That's the really cool part about trace fossils, right? And it does mean that. We have some super cool specimens that show that a part of fighting when it comes to theropod dinosaurs is face biting. They were latching on to their opponent's faces and biting. And here's the other coolest part. Do you remember like earlier in stream where I was talking about the bone density and like how absurd it was for T-Rex to have that much bone in its skull compared to the other theropods, like the Carcharodontosaurids? That's another reason why they would want that. Because not only do they have to deal with the fact that they are like putting out so much pressure that if any other large theropod that wasn't a Tyrannosaur tried to put out that much force, their faces would break. Not only that, but they have to worry about other members of their species biting their face off. It is so cool. So we can get that kind of behavior and stuff like that, but when it comes down to things like, you know, pack hunting or like even pack structures and stuff like that, it's unreliable. I mean, like not even raptors were likely social, and it's really hard to say. It's not a pack behavior isn't incredibly common these days, even in the modern day. Like you look at the like amount of animals on the planet, you look at the ones that are like, or I should say vertebrate animals on the planet, you don't have a lot of them that are pack hunters. Yes, you have some of them. You've got lions, wolves, and stuff like that, but they're very rare to come across, like in the grand scheme of things. So it's hard to say. So yeah, how would you recommend? Oh, I missed that. Whoever's an admin, can you pin that one again? I'm so sorry. I wanted to answer that one. Does Spinosaurus swim well? Probably not. I'm gonna be honest with you. Really dense bones. What do you call all ocean dinosaurs? They're marine reptiles, and they are not ocean dinosaurs. Mosasaurs are just straight up lizards. And plesiosaurs, and by extension, pliosaurs are probably closer to turtles. Thank you. How would you recommend people who are new to dinosaurs on how to learn about them in general? Oh, this is like my favorite question because I get to tell you where I learned to like really, really love dinosaurs as an adult. I've loved dinosaurs since I was a kid, but like growing up as an adult, I've loved them even more because guess what? The internet is a great place if you know where to look. I'm going to give you a few YouTube channels, and I'm also going to give you a few book recommendations as well. The YouTube channel Your Dinosaurs Are Wrong is exceptional for learning about dinosaurs, and I do mean that. They are so good at their stuff because not only are all of their videos up to date with the most scientifically accurate stuff when they go out, but if the video becomes out of date, they will go back, re-record a segment, and then edit the video and fix it. They are so good about that stuff. Your Dinosaurs Are Wrong is just a great source for like anyone who is super enthusiastic about dinosaurs or wants to learn more about them. There's Clint's Reptiles. I've got friends here on TikTok, Dino Guide, Dino Facts. Lindsay Nicole's also really good. Just there's a lot of good sources on like YouTube, content creators, stuff like that. Book recommendations, The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs is just exceptional. I 100% recommend that. There's also Dinosaur Behavior, What They Did and How We Know by Dave Hone. Check that out. I actually haven't gotten that book yet. It's on my Christmas wish list. So yeah, give a good look into those. How do we know which dinosaurs were ectotherms and which ones were endotherms, and did it affect stamina? There's a good chance that all dinosaurs were warm-blooded. That's for those of you that don't know the terminology, that's effectively asking, how do we know which dinosaurs were warm-blooded and which ones are cold-blooded? There's a good chance, based off of their anatomy, most, if not all, dinosaurs were warm-blooded. Because here's the thing, right? You'll probably know that cold-blooded animals, by and large, are a little bit more sluggish, right? But we know that a lot of dinosaurs probably weren't. And we look at the living dinosaurs today, birds. Guess what? They're warm-blooded, right? The only lineage of dinosaurs left alive is warm-blooded. And here's the thing. We have evidence of dinosaurs being in extreme cold environments all the way back in the Jurassic. So here's your kind of like weird way of looking at it. Either most dinosaurs were cold-blooded, and a handful of them independently evolved to be warm-blooded and like went and lived in these colder environments, because even plesiosaurs and marine reptiles, they were living in these really cold conditions. Or all of them, or most of the dinosaurs that ever lived, were warm-blooded. Now, as for like how you figure that out by looking at bones and stuff like that, it's really, really tricky. And honestly, I can't give you a really concise answer on how they do that, because I myself don't really know. But the biggest piece of like evidence for them possibly all being warm-blooded comes down to A, the only lineage of dinosaurs left are warm-blooded, and B, it would make more sense based off of their like actual anatomy for them to be warm-blooded. It just kind of makes a bit more sense for that to be the case. Will we ever know completely? Maybe, maybe not. There's also some people who think they could have been a mixture of the two. They could have been, what would you call a mixture of warm and cold-blooded? Cool-blooded? Can we go with that? Can we call it cool-blooded? We're going to call it cool-blooded. So, yeah. Yeah. What is the smallest and the biggest dinosaur? Oh. I'm going to ask you guys this question because it's so fun. I'll tell you the biggest dinosaur. The biggest dinosaur is going to be, no matter how you estimate it, is going to be a sauropod of some kind. The longest dinosaur is Supersaurus. The tallest dinosaur is Sauroposeidon. The heaviest dinosaur is kind of up for debate at the moment, but the safe answers are things like Patagotitan and Argentinosaurus. Now, let me ask you guys this. What's the smallest dinosaur? What do you guys think the smallest dinosaur are? Aww. Man. Someone was already saying it. Man. Yeah. It is the hummingbird. Specifically, the bumblebee hummingbird. It is literally the size of your fingernail. It's about the size of your thumbnail, more than likely. So yeah, it is the hummingbird. Were there only 2 good prehistoric planet avatars in VR chat for the T-Rex and Cybersuchus? I don't know. Just it comes down to the fact that like a lot of the avatars that I have here in VR chat are ported over from like video games and stuff like that. So the models are already like pre-existing. You just pull them into VR chat and like rig them up. With prehistoric planet ones, you have to completely make those from the ground up because like there's no files, no nothing. It's a show. You have to build those avatars from the ground up. So yeah. Smallest non-avian dinosaur. Would Anchiornis count as a non-avian dinosaur? I mean, technically, it's in the same lineage that would give us birds, but probably be somewhere around that. Yeah, something like that. Do I play Path of Titans? I love Path of Titans. I love Path of Titans so much. I love the new map. I love the new Tylosaurus. Tylosaurus is my favorite marine reptile. So love Path. So much fun. Love Path. Why is it Montosaurus so peak? Cause Montosaurus was everywhere. And I mean that. Literally, late Cretaceous North America, you can't miss it. There were thousands of them. So here's the cool part. There are 2 recognized species of Edmontosaurus right now. And of those 2 species, you have Regalius, and then you have Anectens. Now, Anectens has gotten a lot of updates recently because we know now that Anectens had, forgive me, I am in the ceiling. We know that Anectens now had this crest right here. Now, it also had kind of like a sail running down its back, which is very strange because it's also not a sail. It's kind of just like a continuation of the crest structure that runs down all the way to the base of the tail. They also have 8 hooves. Why does Edmontosaurus have 8 hooves? We're not really sure. But we imagine that they were kind of walking around a lot, so it would definitely help. So they had a hoof on every single one of their back toes, and then they had hooves on their front limbs. There is also, and I'm really sorry that I'm going to have to break this news to some of you. So there's a specimen of Edmontosaurus that is not one of either of the 2 recognized species, and that specimen was recently put under some study, and they found that there's a good chance that hadrosaurs did not have bony crests, right? When you look at a lot of hadrosaurs like Lambeosaurus, Parasaurolophus, you notice that a lot of them have these big, bony, hard crests, right? Here's the thing. That's likely not the case. There's a good chance that most hadrosaurs had fleshy crests. I don't know how else to make that news better. Just how some chickens have the weird flap of skin on the top of their head? Yeah, they probably had something like that. I don't know what else to tell you. It's just absolutely cursed knowledge. But yeah. Wait, I just got 3 hadrosaur tattoos. Ooh, I really hope those were the skeletons and not a reconstruction of them, because those might be out of date. See, this is why if I ever get tattoos of a dinosaur, it's gonna be the fossil. It's not gonna be the animal, it's gonna be the fossil. So yeah. Off topic, but Lakota, would you leave the PT staff team? I just retired. I didn't leave. I just kind of said, hey, I want to focus more on doing content here online, and I don't know if I can be a good staff member if I try to focus that. So I was just I think I'm just gonna retire from working with them. But I still love their stuff. I love the Primordial Tyrants. Their stuff is absolute peak. Are you kidding me? Go look at the Primordial Tyrants T-Rex, Utah Raptor. They've got Austroraptor coming up soon. I don't know when that's releasing, but based off of the teasers that they've shown off, it just looks absolutely awesome. They have a new skin mod that just came out. Just absolutely amazing work from that team. They work so hard, and I love their stuff so much. But yeah. It says because well, I appreciate it, man. I love the PT team, and I'm in PTSR a handful of the days out of the week, so yeah, it's a lot of fun. Would Shentungosaurus defend themselves just like sauropods by using their size like a sauropod? Yes, more than likely, because if you don't know, Shentungosaurus is a relative of Edmontosaurus that is so large. I mean, absolutely so huge that it is the largest non-sauropod dinosaur to ever exist. That is how big it is. It is larger than every other dinosaur that is not a long-necked dinosaur. Now, here's the thing. Shantungosaurus would be fighting up against a tyrannosaur called Zhuchang Tyrannus. Here's the thing. Zhuchang Tyrannus got new material this year, and they found out that Zhuchang is an absolute monster of a size. Like, it is comparable to T-Rex in some aspects, which is insane. But then again, it makes sense. Like, if you're hunting down a hadrosaur that is so much larger than Edmontosaurus, right? It makes sense that you would be comparable in size, if not bigger, than the animal that is hunting Edmontosaurus, right? Absolutely crazy stuff. But yeah, that's how Shant would probably use its size and stuff like that. Have you ever wanted to be a narrator in a documentary about dinosaurs? Yes! Yes! Okay. So to those of you who are new, or maybe some of you that don't know, who only come in for dinosaur class, I occasionally post little short stories here on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. These short stories are typically shorter than like 3 minutes. You follow probably like a singular dinosaur through a certain event, sometimes 2, and I love doing those. I love writing, I love telling stories, and I love dinosaurs. So this is like my favorite thing that I upload, and I'm getting a lot better at it too, and I can really tell. And I just love doing that. I would love to be a narrator for a full-length dinosaur documentary. That would be a dream come true, because like back in high school, I took a class on like video games, and one of like how to make video games, and one of the like lessons in that class is like voice acting and sound design, and I fell in love with that. I would love to be a voice actor. That's like the dream right there. And to do voice acting and dinosaur related stuff, dude, sign me up. I'd love to do that. But yeah. Do you think mosasaurs could have been venomous since they're close relatives to monitor lizards? There is a chance, but I would say that depends on when exactly venom evolves in monitor lizards, and that would also depend on if they would really need it. If we're talking about smaller mosasaurs, I could definitely see a use for venom. If we're talking about the big ones, I don't see why they would need them. I really don't. Because like you're looking at animals that are like the size of or like larger than orcas are. And orcas are some of the largest carnivores on the planet today. So I don't really see why the larger ones would need venom, but maybe it would be like a vestigial trait if venom like evolved like super early in monitor lizards, so maybe. Mosasaurus is a whale-sized Komodo dragon. A bit, yeah. It is. Some of them are huge, but some of them are also pretty small. There's a lot of like smaller mosasaurs. Like there are some that you could hold in one hand. I mean, well, maybe not one hand. They are pretty long. So in 2 hands. Difference between Apatosaurus and Diplodocus. So Diplodocus morphologically is a lot longer. The tail of Diplodocus is super, super long. Now, the way that Diplodocus is also standing is a little different. Their posture is a little different. Apatosaurus, now, here's the thing. Apatosaurus is a diplodocid. So they are closely related. So asking this is a bit like, what's the difference between T-Rex and Tarbosaurus, right? Both of those guys are tyrannosaurs. Both of them are very similar, right? The main differences are going to come down to probably size. So that'll be like, I think Apatosaurus's bones are like a bit more, they're probably larger, a bit more bulky maybe. And it's just going to come down to slight morphological differences. I do think that Diplodocus had a wider jaw, I want to say. They had a wider jaw. But, yeah, pretty cool animals either way. Have you heard of the Nautilus, of the fact that they have survived major extinction events and didn't evolve? Yeah, so that's kind of, there's a lot of like really interesting animals like that. They're called living fossils. There's a lot of really cool examples of that. Sharks and alligators or well, the lineages that would give us sharks and alligators are super old. The modern day sharks and alligators, those lineages are probably not as old as you think they are, but like at their like most like oldest forms, they're old. They're really old. They're older than trees. Let's see. Horseshoe crabs have been around for a few 100 million years. The coelacanth has been around for like a really long time. Nautilus, of course, is one. You have a lot of animals that effectively just survive these extinction events based off of like their lifestyles not being disrupted by them and just overall just minding their own business. And I will sometimes get people who will ask me, it's just like, well, if evolution is a constant thing, why aren't these guys changing? I'm going to tell you this. Have you ever, like, worked with someone on, like, I don't know, like a maintenance thing or, like, done something? You've probably, even if you haven't, you've probably heard the term, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's exactly why. If they were, like, good in those examples, enough to survive those extinction events, they're good. They don't need to change. But here's the thing, they also do. Not a lot of people like to acknowledge this, but they do change. The modern coelacanth and the fossils of coelacanth we have from the Cretaceous show that there are morphological differences between their ancient and modern relatives. There's slight changes. They're not dramatic changes. Horseshoe crabs. There's tons of really weird extinct horseshoe crabs that are just tried like everything. Sharks, oh my god, we can't get enough of these weird guys. They're everywhere. Look at Helicorprion. Why does it have a buzzsaw for a mouth? And I'm not even kidding about that. Hold on, where's my Helicorprion model? I've got a Helicorprion model. You want to see how cursed sharks get? I found it. Look at this. Why? Why does it need this? So, here, hold on, let me move the camera up a little bit. So, yeah. We love cursed sharks. Yes, I agree. What is the least known dinosaur? I could give you a ton of different examples of fragmentary dinosaurs that are like mostly incomplete and stuff like that. But the one I always like to talk about is something called the Mongolian Titanosaur, the Mongolian Titan. And I think this animal is so cool because of what we don't know about it. If you don't know, there is a Titanosaur in Mongolia, or that was in Mongolia, that has left behind no biological fossils. Remember what I was talking about earlier, the difference between biological and trace fossils? Okay, we only find trace fossils of this Titanosaur, and they're absolutely huge. There's just these massive footprints that paleontologists find out there in Mongolia. And the thing is that there are other Titanosaurs in the area, but none of them are that big. None of them are big enough to be leaving behind footprints that size. So there is just this ghost of a giant out there in Mongolia. And it's so cool. It's so creepy. But we have no fossils of it. We just have its footprints. It's just a ghost. And that is just wild to me. So yeah. What dinosaur are you right now? I'm not a dinosaur. I'm a shark. Kind of. I don't think Helicorprion's actually technically a shark. Like I was saying before, like the modern lineage that gives us what we understand now as sharks is not as old as you probably think it is. But this guy was a cartilaginous fish, so it does oftentimes get lumped into like that same categorization of shark. And also does have the very similar body structure in most of its reconstructions. But yeah, this is Helicorprion. They were around during the Permian, which is right before the Mesozoic. And they do, unfortunately, go extinct before the Great Dying, I want to say. By the way, just to clarify why my head's moving so much, this is a hand puppet. You're looking at my hand. Hello. Whee! This is a hand puppet. It's so weird. So if I, like, flop over, it's because I'm looking at chat. Yeah. How big would the Earth need to be if all 99.9 extinct life was still alive? I don't think it's a matter of size in order to support that. It's a functioning biosphere, right? And I'll tell you this. If every single animal that ever existed throughout all of Earth's history was suddenly brought back to life with a healthy population, there would be an extinction event. It would be a full-blown extinction event because you would have these new animals that are completely disrupting modern ecosystems. You would have entire prehistoric ecosystems that are now jumbled up. Like a T-Rex and an Allosaurus never saw each other. There's more time between T-Rex and Allosaurus than there is between us and T-Rex. So it would just be complete ecological collapse all over the planet. It would just be awful. It's not about size. It's about the fact that you're bringing all of them back at once and suddenly everything is dead again. So, yeah. What's the unknown dromaeosaurid from Alaska? I think, well, if it's an unknown dromaeosaurid, then, well, it's unknown. There's no name for it. I'm gonna switch into my Tarbo real quick, just so I don't have to use the hand puppet. But yeah, so the thing about Alaska is that the main formation that exists out there in Alaska is the Prince Creek Formation. The Prince Creek Formation is really cool. It's one of my favorite fossil formations in the world, as it does yield the bones of my favorite dinosaur of all time, Nanooksaurus hoglundi. Love that guy. Love Nanooksaurus. If you didn't know, my logo is actually Nanooksaurus. It was created by my friend Starkis Vixen, and we use the skull material of Nanooksaurus, Tarbosaurus, and T-Rex in order to replicate it because, well, we don't have a lot of the skull material of Nanook. But yeah, the thing about the Prince Creek is that it's really, really isolated. And so there's not a lot of the time we don't have the opportunity to go up there and like dig and stuff like that. That is the unfortunate part about that. But yeah. Did you watch Dinosaur Train as a kid? Yes, I grew up on PBS. So yeah, I watched Dinosaur Train all the time. Great show, honestly. For like kids, yeah, that show's great. I love that. But yeah. Is it true that there was a 2 million time period where it was raining nonstop? Yes. So if you didn't know, there's this 2 million year long period where it is just constantly raining. Were there breaks in the rain? Yes. Did it last longer than a week? I highly doubt it. But why? Okay. So it's actually a mixture of several different things. So at the time, Pangea was still kind of kicking around, right? But the thing is that it's starting to break up. And when you have a continent that's like breaking apart, guess what happens? Volcanoes! A lot of volcanoes! And that increases the temperature of the air around it and stuff like that. So you have more water that is entering the atmosphere, and when you're doing that and you still have like the volcanic ash clouds and stuff like that sitting around, and so all the rain goes up there with them, and then that pulls all the ash down, and then that gets really complicated. But the thing is that if that was the only thing going on, it probably wouldn't have been as bad. But there's another side to this that makes this worse, and it's geology. Because Pangea had this kind of interior seaway kind of thing, because it kind of had this weird like crescent shape going on in some places. So you have these mountains that are now blocking rain from going into certain locations, and it's not really disappearing. So all of it just goes into the interior of the continent, and it's just raining all the time. And what's so interesting about this is that when this happened, right before it started, I think dinosaurs made up like 20% of the fossil record, probably a little more, maybe a little less of the fossil record before the rain started. after the rain period, after this super long rainy period ends, dinosaurs make up 70% of the fossil content. If it wasn't for these massive rainstorms, there's a good chance dinosaurs probably would have never gotten as dominant as they did. Now, then again, there's a lot of factors that goes into that. Of course, obviously, you have the in-Triassic extinction, which really solidifies their domination across the planet, and stuff like that. So, yeah, just crazy time to be alive. What's the difference between Tyrannosaurus and Tyrannosauroids? Tyrannosaurus is the genus. So Tyrannosaurus rex, Tyrannosaurus macraensis, that is Tyrannosaurus. Then you have the Tyrannosaur in A. Tyrannosaur in A is a tribe or like a subgroup within the family of Tyrannosauridae. Tyrannosauridae is inhabited by things like Zhucheng tyrannus and Tarbosaurus. Tyrannosauridae is the family, which is broken up into two other groups as well. You have the Albertosaurinae, and then again the subgroup of the Tyrannosaurinae and stuff like that. And then the Tyrannosauroids are the superfamily. The Tyrannosauroids Roididae encompasses several families, including the Tyrannosaurs and the Proceratosaurids, and also the Eutyrannosaurs, which are not to be confused with Eutyrannus. Eutyrannosaurs are kind of like a weird middle ground between Proceratosaurids and the later Tyrannosauridae. So yeah. I think I'm going to get one more question. Outside of dinosaur knowledge, how would a jellyfish even become a living animal, being 90% water? You would be amazed what evolution can do. Because even today, I think one of the most fascinating organisms on the planets, on this planet, and forgive me for not remembering like the name for this type of like organism, because it's not an animal. There are certain like microorganisms that will link together and create this giant line in the ocean. And it's so big that you can see it with the naked eye. They're like, it's absurd. It's crazy, right? And then you also have the extreme of the animal kingdom, right? You ever heard of water bears? Absolutely incredible animals. These are animals that have the ability to adapt to almost everything. You can send them into space. You can drop them in the ocean. You can set them on fire. You can drown them. You can completely deprive them of oxygen and food, and they will come back to life after hibernating. They will enter us like a kind of hibernation type thing, and they will come back to life once the right conditions are met. Incredible animals. Evolution is just wild. You find like just these absolutely incredible things that life does, and it's just so fascinating. It's so bizarre. Life on this planet is just absolutely insane. It is so cool. And, you know, I really wish we did a lot better at protecting it. And that is the tragedy of it. But yeah, it's just jellyfish. Jellyfish just came about because, well, they're really simple organisms. And, well, being a simple organism means they probably showed up on Earth pretty early. So, yeah. And, whoa, thank you, Dino Nerd, for the galaxy. I really appreciate that, man. I believe life is parasitic. Man-o-war jellyfish? Is a man-o-war jellyfish? It might be. Again, I'm the dinosaur guy, so I wouldn't really know. But I don't know. Life is cool. And it's really fascinating. I also think humans are really fascinating as well. Just kind of going along with that. I think we're a very interesting species. I don't think that we're like the root of all evil. I say that we do a lot of evil, but I don't think we're bad. I think we're a cool species. And we do a lot of fascinating stuff. So yeah. Not jellyfish? Okay, cool. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Ellie. She's gonna be my marine biologist at this point. All right. Now, With all that said and done, we are getting to the end of class here today. I would like to thank all of you for attending today. This has been a lot of fun. And you know, I'm honestly I'm gonna be completely. I don't think I've stopped smiling throughout all of class today. I had a lot of fun with you guys today. It's been a really good class. Um, I would like to wish all of you a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Whatever you're celebrating, if you're not celebrating anything, if you're celebrating everything, I hope you have a good rest of your or a good next week. Do not expect a lot of activity from me in the next few weeks, as I will be gone for the next couple of days. As well as oh yeah, if you're a fan of the Paleo Pod, we will not be doing an episode this week or next week. We will be with our families. With all of that said and done, thank you everyone who stayed with us throughout the entire stream. You guys are awesome. Thank you everyone who liked, commented, shared, followed, and all that good stuff. And special thank you to everyone who gifted. You guys are amazing. You make my day. Thank you guys so very, very much. I love all of y'all. Y'all are just blow my mind every single stream. With all that said and done, I hope you guys have a great rest of y'all's day. I hope you have a great next week. But once again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all that good stuff. And I will catch you guys later. Also, join the community Discord. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's day. I'll catch y'all later. Bye-bye.